I have been a records clerk for the Vethrani Joint Arbitration Tribunal for 22 years. I have logged declarations of war. I have entered the dissolution instruments of 3 separate trade compacts, each of which had believed itself permanent. I have received, catalogued, and sealed more documents than I can count, and I have read more of them aloud than any clerk in this chamber's recorded history, a distinction no one at this tribunal has ever acknowledged, and one I have never sought acknowledgement for. I tell you this so you understand what it means when I say that I did not understand what I was holding until the 3rd paragraph. The apology session for the Earth mission was docketed as a routine subordination proceeding. The tribunal's charge reader, a meticulous Vethrani named Soreth Keln, who had never once shortened a ceremony in his tenure, had prepared 47 formal charges. Each charge cited a specific act of human administrative conduct that the tribunal had determined violated one or another provision of its operating framework: unauthorized corridor usage, unregistered waypoint designations, failure to present credentials before the tribunal's secondary review panel on 4 separate occasions spanning 11 years. The charges were real in the sense that the tribunal had generated them. Whether the tribunal had authority to generate them was, as far as anyone in that chamber was concerned that morning, a settled question. It was not a settled question. The chamber holds 212 seats when fully convened. On the morning of the apology session, every seat was filled. Arbitrators in their formal robes, the pale green fabric that signals active jurisdiction. Species representatives from 11 member bodies. Observers from 4 non-member states who had paid the filing fee to watch from the gallery tier. The tribunal's lead arbitrator, De Van Sorel, sat at the elevated central bench with the particular stillness of a man who expects a ceremony to go exactly as planned. At the respondents' table, 30 meters from the bench, Soren Orel sat alone. He was the Earth mission's senior filing attaché, not an ambassador, not a diplomat. He had the title that humans give to the person responsible for the paperwork, which in this chamber, on this morning, was precisely the right person to have sent. He was perhaps 60 years old, gray at the temples, wearing a dark coat that was neither ceremonial nor shabby. He had no aide beside him. He had a document case on the table in front of him, the kind made from treated leather with a waxed cord closure. He had not opened it. When Soreth Keln began reading the charges, Orel did not move. 47 charges take a long time to read at the pace Keln preferred. I processed the docket at my bench, updating the session record in real time, noting each charge as entered. I did not watch Orel closely for the first 20 minutes. My work required me to face the bench. But in the pauses between charges, when Keln drew breath, I could see in my peripheral vision that Orel had not shifted in his chair. The final charge was read at the 43rd minute of the session. It cited the Earth mission's operation of a navigational relay installation at Corridor 7 Theta, without tribunal authorization, a violation of Framework Provision 11, Section 4. Keln read it with the same neutral weight he had given all 46 that preceded it. Sorel then addressed Orel directly. The formal subordination demand. The language was specified in the tribunal's own procedural code, and Sorel delivered it without embellishment. The Earth mission was invited to enter into the permanent record its acknowledgement of each cited violation and its formal expression of regret for the conduct therein described. Said acknowledgement to constitute binding admission for purposes of future tribunal proceedings. Orel looked at Sorel. He reached forward, undid the waxed cord on the document case, and removed a single bound filing. The paper was archival weight, cream-colored, with a seal I did not immediately recognize. He placed it on the table in front of him. He stood up. He walked to the chamber door. He left. The door closed without a sound. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 4 seconds, long enough for the gallery to register what had happened, long enough for Sorel to look at me. "Clerk," he said, "receive the document. Enter it into the proceeding record. Read it." I walked to the respondent's table. I picked up the filing. The seal on the cover sheet was the Earth mission's administrative mark, but in a form I had not seen before. An older form, the style used before the current mission logo was adopted. Beneath the seal, in plain type, were the words Foundational Navigational Easement and Corridor Authorization, Earth Administrative Mission, filed in the matter of interstitial transit rights, Waypoint Designation Authority, and Dispute Resolution Framework for operations conducted within Vethrani jurisdictional approach space. I returned to my bench. I opened the filing. I began to read. The document was 12 pages, single-spaced. The language was the formal administrative register of the period, dense, careful, precise in the way that documents written by people who do not trust their audience tend to be precise. It established the Earth mission's right to operate navigational relay installations along any corridor approach vector within the Vethrani jurisdictional zone, provided that installations were registered under the mission's own accreditation seal and filed with the relevant regional authority. It established the mission's right to designate waypoints along registered corridors without seeking secondary approval from any subsequent regulatory body established within the same jurisdictional zone. It established that any dispute arising from the mission's operations under these authorizations would be resolved under the dispute resolution framework appended as Exhibit A, which predated any subsequent framework adopted by any body claiming regulatory authority over the same space. That was page 4. By page 6, I had understood the shape of what I was holding. The document was not a response to the tribunal's charges. It was the reason the charges had never had standing to begin with. I kept reading. The chamber was very quiet, 212 people, and the loudest sound was the ventilation system in the ceiling, and very faintly, the sound of my own voice working through archival prose that had been sitting in a filing record for longer than most of the arbitrators in this room had been alive. I reached the final page. I read the execution date. The filing had been submitted, registered, and entered into the relevant regional authority's permanent record 31 years, 4 months, and 11 days before the Vethrani Joint Arbitration Tribunal held its founding session. Every corridor the tribunal had cited, every waypoint designation, every installation at 7 Theta, every act described across 47 charges as an unauthorized violation of the operating framework, all of it had been authorized, not by the tribunal, which had not existed, but by the filing sitting in my hands, submitted to the authority that preceded the tribunal, under a framework that the tribunal's own founding charter had never suspended and never superseded, because no one on the founding committee had checked whether such a framework already existed. The apology session had been docketed as a routine subordination proceeding. The Earth mission's filing attaché had walked out 30 minutes ago. The proceeding's permanent record now contained, in full, the document that proved the tribunal had never held jurisdiction over a single act it had cited across 22 years of regulatory enforcement. Sorel spoke into the silence. His voice was very controlled. The voice of a man who has been trained to sound controlled at exactly the moments when he is not. "Clerk," he said, "the date. 31 years, 4 months, and 11 days before this body's founding session," I said. The filing is time-stamped and countersigned by the regional authority in office at the time. The countersignature is verifiable. He said nothing after that. I have entered a great many documents into the permanent record of the Vethrani Joint Arbitration Tribunal. Declarations, dissolutions, verdicts on matters that shape the commercial and political arrangements of 11 member species across 4 decades of this body's existence. I have read all of them aloud, as required by procedural code, into the session record. I have never read one that made 212 people stop breathing. The apology session was adjourned without further statement at the 58th minute. No additional proceedings have been scheduled. The tribunal's legal chamber filed a request for a full jurisdictional review 4 days later. I processed the docket entry myself. In the field marked basis for review, the entry reads, "Foundational authority discrepancy identified in permanent session record. 31 years, 4 months, and 11 days. The humans had been here before we were.